take on modernism and postmodernism.
Okay, a take on modernism and postmodernism.
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. Thank you. What's your name again?
Shana, sir.
Shahnaz. Okay, thank you, Shahnaz.
Sir,
Uh,
and we were
yes.
talking about the Chinese Revolution, sir.
Okay, Chinese Revolution. And what else? Only the Chinese Revolution, was it? A few revolutions, right? We spoke about revolutions in general, my dears. Please understand that in the novel, in Doris Lessing's Golden Notebook, I mentioned to you one paragraph where there was, this question of which is the greatest revolution, right? And I think it was Paul, the character Paul, who was answering that question. Paul or Willie, maybe. Which is the greatest revolution? Is it the Chinese Revolution? Is it the French Revolution? No, right? The current revolution that was happening in the Golden Notebook was the revolution of women against men. Well, anyway, that is a very minor part. That is a very minor part of the novel, right? So let us come to the main thrust once more, right? I will take you through the main thrust of the Golden Notebook, essentially, by also shedding light on what the precursors were to this novel, the questions raised in this novel, the answers attempted by Doris Lessing to an extent. And on the other hand, I also want to suggest to you, its contemporary influence, and then the political slash historical implications that this novel made, and the other works in this paper, right? In my section, Waiting for Godot by Beckett, William Golding's Lord of the Flies, W.B. Yeats' Second Coming, and Doris Lessing's Golden Notebook. These four works in 20th century British literature. What did they do? What did they try to do? How did it begin, right? And where did they leave us? Where have they left us, let us say? So, in the beginning, in the introductory lectures, I mentioned to you a few things about, these existential philosophy, right? Nihilism, existentialism, questions of absurdity in the introductory lecture to Waiting for Godot, right? I was mentioning to you Friedrich Nietzsche, God is dead, and then, absurdity, and, the beginning of that play with the dialogue, nothing to be done. Now, this nothing to be done, in our very lectures, I would have used it for n number of times. And why do I do that, or why did I do that, is to show you the importance of that one sentence in post-war English literature, right? Post-war English literature, or I'll take that thread, right from the position where that kind of a sentence became necessary. Nothing to be done. Where did it spring from? Why did it happen? Why was it so important? Nothing to be done. Nothing to be done is an answer, right? Is an answer by Samuel Beckett, right? In the dramatic realm, it is an answer. It's not a question. And so, what is this answer? What is the question that Beckett was answering by his sentence, nothing to be done? What was the question? It is obviously, what is to be done, right? The question to that answer is, what is to be done? And I'm not just cooking up words here and making semantic games, right? Let me take you to, the implications of this question, what is to be done, in literary history, right? I won't deviate too much into, philosophical, what do you call, knickknacks, right? So, what is to be done? right? I don't know if you have any idea about this title, but it's a very famous title, right? The first, where we find this title, What is to be done, is in a novel by Chernyshevsky, right? Nikolai Chernyshevsky. His name, if you want the spelling, please contact me. Let me know in the text box or something, right? Nikolai Chernyshevsky. These things you won't learn in ordinary literature classes, but they are all literary critics, right? Nikolai Chernyshevsky is a Russian literary critic, 19th century Russian literary critic, right? And he wrote he wrote a novel. He wrote a novel with the title What is to be Done. And this novel was 1863, right? It came out in 1863. Now, this question, what is to be done, was first, first evidence of its, appearance is in Chernyshevsky's novel, the title of his novel, What is to be Done. 1863, my dears. 19th century. This is 19th century. 1863, if you consider that moment of time in literary history, right? Victorian. In England, it was, Victorian age, right? You had beautiful fictional works coming, 19th century British fiction, right? You had Jane Austen 1840s, beautiful novels, remarkable novels, right? Jane Austen you had there, and then you had Dickens over there, and then remarkable realists you had at that time, right? Not only in England, in France you had Balzac. In France you had Balzac, right? Balzac was, is considered to be the first modern writer or modern realist writer, let's say, right? I want you to keep these terms very clearly in your mind, or at least write it down somewhere, because these, in literary history somewhere or other, they'll be useful for you. So realism, right? From French Balzac, then it came to England and Russia and so on and so forth. But I want to take you to Russia, right? Considering Chernyshevsky's question, what is to be done? Where did this question spring from now again, right? I told you in the 19th century, towards the end of the 19th century, is where these problems arose. The Nietzsche's problem of God is dead, right? So if God is dead, then the implication of that question is, then something should be done, right? Something should be done. Now, this was a serious problem, I'm telling you. Don't consider this a religious problem. This is not at all a religious problem. It's a philosophical problem completely. God is dead means not, the God who created us. No, Nietzsche doesn't mean that by God is dead, right? Nietzsche's meaning of that God is dead is the concept, the idea of God is dead, right? Take it along these lines, you will get complete sense out of these statements, right? So now, in the late 19th century, Marxism came, right? Marxism, made its appearance, and Freudianism made its appearance, right? By the end of the 19th century. Darwinism, like I mentioned in the introductory lectures, one Darwinism, the other Freudianism, the third is Marxism. Three revolutionary, radical philosophies that turned the whole world around, right? So questions had to be asked now, what is to be done? And this question, Chernyshevsky, how did he, get the idea to bring that question? That comes from Ivan Turgenev, right? Turgenev, a great Russian writer, right? Ivan Turgenev, you must know. If you don't, better get to know. Ivan Turgenev wrote a nihilist novel, right? He published a nihilist novel, right? Nihilist, right? Fathers and Sons is the title of that novel. In that, there is a hero called Bazarov. He is a nihilist, and in literary history, that Bazarov is the first anti-hero, right? Classic, typical anti-hero, right? Obviously, you had other anti-heroes too before, but typical selfish, self-centered, nihilistic anti-hero, that Bazarov in Fathers and Sons by Ivan Turgenev. And Turgenev presented this kind of a picture, right? What would the world be like if it was governed by rich people like Bazarov, right? And then, prompted by this, Chernyshevsky in 1863 wrote his novel what is to be done, right? And Chernyshevsky gave a kind of a rational, response to deal with this existential slash absurdist slash nihilist paradigm, right? Existential, nihilist, absurdist paradigm. I told you it came by the end of the 19th century, 1800s by the end. So Chernyshevsky tried to solve this issue or tried to give some suggestion, and he suggested rationalism as the key, right? Answers. You remember the previous classes? I was giving you many questions, right? That Doris Lessing raises in the novel, right? Doris Lessing suggests, and then I raised a lot of questions to you. What is wrong with that? Why is this so? And so on and so forth. Now, let's go to the answers, right? Let's look at the answers that people tried to, put forth. Now, Chernyshevsky made, rationalism his slogan, but again, that was a very, very problematic thing. That was a very, very problematic thing. And then next, I mentioned to you 1864. I already mentioned to you Notes from Underground by Dostoevsky. Dostoevsky replied to Chernyshevsky, in 1864 in his novel Notes from Underground, right? A very key text to understanding existentialism, Notes from Underground. And this is the first, Dostoevsky's Notes from Underground, first considered as the first existential novel, and also the answer that Beckett makes almost 100 years later was already given by Dostoevsky here, right? Dostoevsky did not use those words, but he was writing the whole novel, a short novel, Notes from Underground, as a response to Chernyshevsky's question, what is to be done? Dostoevsky answered, nothing to be done, right? He didn't use these words. I'm talking about the theme, the central motive of his novel, right? Notes from Underground gave an ideological answer telling nothing to be done. Nothing can be done, right? Now, we are coming to the answer now. Let me look at the implications of the answer, right? Nothing to be done. And that is why in Dostoevsky's novel, that underground man, the hero, he doesn't have a name. He is called the underground man. He goes and lives below ground, right? Even literally, also metaphorically. In both ways, he lives below ground because obviously nothing to be done. In this kind of a fix, in this existential, absurdist, nihilist world, nothing is to be done, right? When philosophies come and, ruin the whole history of human thought, when philosophy comes and hits a dead end, when people cannot make sense of life any further, life in the sense social, political, then obviously nothing to be done. And so underground man went underground and began writing a diary. That is the novel Notes from Underground, criticizing every potential subject on earth, right? So initially there, nothing to be done, 1864, Dostoevsky, right? And the next one, again, the question was asked, right? That, as, in the beginning of the 19th century, Marxism gained popularity, right, in Russia, communism, obviously, right, in Russia. And then, again pops the title in 1902, again the title, What is to be done, right? Again the title, What is to be done, by Lenin, right? Lenin, obviously, communist, Vladimir Lenin, right? Leninist communism. 1902, Lenin published a pamphlet, a political pamphlet with the same title, What is to be done? Subtitle goes, Burning Questions for Our Movement, 1902, right? So, repetitively this question is being asked. And again, there will be an answer. When I'm talking about this question answer mode, please understand, my dears, we are not simply, doing a preparation for exam, right? Asking a question, answering the question. No, that's not what I'm doing. I'm trying to simply pull some threads where these questions are available and where these answers are coming from. I just want you to connect the dots, right? So there is another, let me give you another. See, these are not literal, right? Literal dealing of the problem, obviously, Doris Lessing has done a little bit in her novel, which I will close with after I give you the essential, problems with this question and this answer. What is to be done? Nothing to be done, right? So now nothing to be done again. Again, it's pervasiveness, right? It's not accident, my dears. You need to understand, when you read literary history, I'm not telling you to read history of English literature. If you listen to my classes, you will know, right? Literary history means reading all the works of literature, chronologically from time immemorial. That is literary history, right? When you go through that, you will find these questions and answers repeated quite haphazardly, not symmetrically, not pre-planned, not influential, right? It would simply pop up somewhere, you don't know where, right? Let me give you another example. In 1915, Joseph Conrad, right? Joseph Conrad published his final masterpiece called Victory, right? His novel was called Victory, an Island Tale in 1915. And this novel, right, I don't want to get into the details, right? It's a remarkable novel, the only novel of Joseph Conrad which anybody can understand, right? All of the novels, you need to be a literary big head to understand all of the novels of Joseph Conrad. This novel, later in his life, so almost everybody can understand, but it's very complex, very psychologically complex. But this novel, Victory, ends with the lines, right? The narrator of this novel finally leaves the island, right? The hero is named as Axel Heist, rhyming with Christ. I told you, you might think I am playing games with words, right? Linguistic games, right? But I think in another 3 to 4 years, you will understand, these, word puns, names and all, they have firm linguistic roots, right? Firm linguistic roots and very dangerous, psycholinguistic implications. Axel Heist, Jesus Christ, and so on and so forth, right? This man, Axel Heist, beautiful hero, remarkable man, saves a girl, takes her to an island, and they live together happily ever after and so on. But there comes a point where Axel Heist has to pay for the redeeming work he had done, because he redeemed that girl from a very dangerous place. So he had to be beaten, right? And the novel ends with the death of both, that girl and the hero. And the narrator, a friend of the heroes, he leaves the island after the whole island is burnt down. This man is destroyed, right? And the novel ends with these lines by the narrator, within quotes: "There was nothing to be done there, absolutely nothing." Right? There was nothing to be done there, absolutely nothing. This published in 1915, right? And then after a long gap, after the wars, you find this problem again popping up in 1956, 1954 itself in French, and in English 1956. Again, Beckett comes back with nothing to be done. So obviously we need to consider the question here, right? Nothing to be done is an answer, right? And because we have been looking at answers all throughout this paper, right? Beckett's Waiting for Godot is a kind of an answer, right? And Golding's Lord of the Flies is a kind of an answer. Lessing's Golden Notebook is a kind of an answer. So we are looking at very confusing answers, and that is why we do not understand the question, right? The question is the problem now, right? What is to be done? That is the problem. And I remember, I vaguely recall, I don't know if you recall, when I began this paper, 20th century British literature, I began with this, nothing to be done, what is to be done. I already spoke about this, but I'll give you a recap. Right? Now, there are three, answers to this question of what is to be done in 20th century British literature and in 20th century European literature. Every doyen writer, every major writer was trying to answer this question one way or another. The answer to the question, what is to be done, right? So I classified already in the beginning of this course, I classified post-war writers into three groups. Again, I'm going to talk about it, but as a response to this question, what is to be done and what kind of answers they suggest, right? So the earliest of this, I told you, one, among the three major heads, one is Bertolt Brecht, right? The German Bertolt Brecht, his epic theater, right? That was an answer to this question, what is to be done, right? Brecht, a German dramatist, and he had this drama crew called the Berliner Ensemble, right? The Berliner Ensemble. He was obviously, exiled from Germany because he was anti-Hitler, and so he had to keep traveling to England, to America, and so on. So Brecht began this drama crew called the Berliner Ensemble along with his wife, and then they were producing plays. And it was these people who produced Beckett's Waiting for Godot. In 1956 in England, these people produced Beckett's Waiting for Godot and John Osborne's Look Back in Anger, right? Angry Young Men movement, you might have known. Okay, so the answer that Brecht was trying to give, please 1 second. Sorry. Yes. So the answer that Brecht propagated, if you remember, was materialism, dialectical materialism, right? Back to Marxism, right? And I told you about the concept of alienation he used, right? Verfremdungseffekt effect and so on, right? So the Marxists, or Bertolt Brecht for that matter, was trying to, bring about a restoration, right? Restoring, meaning. I was talking about meaning in the last class too, right? The answer to this question, what is to be done, right? The Brechtian group, right? The Brechtian group tried to restore the materialistic view, right? The materialistic view of the world, right? That was an answer. That was a kind of an answer, right? Look at the world in materialistic terms. Look at the world in, terms of money, in terms of power structure, right? The Marxist words I'm using generally, right? These are the Marxist words they'll use: power structure, capitalism, proletariat, bourgeois, right? With these this communist principles, you have a materialist view of this world, completely depending on money as the prime moving factor. Now that obviously it's a very important thing. It's a very, very important thing, right? This money-centric, view of the world. Communism or Marxism, for that matter, is a remarkable philosophy in that sense. It has plenty of pitfalls, right? It has plenty of problems. Marxism or communism, as Lessing also deals with it. But it was remarkable in the sense that Marx and Engels, they figured out, that this breaking up I was talking to you last class, has definitely something to do with capitalist greed, right? Capitalist greed, the greed for money, then money will lead to power, right? Power, politics, so on and so forth. So they began to try to deconstruct this social political relations in terms of money, mercenary factors, right? Mercenary monetary considerations, and worked out well. Theoretically, definitely worked out well, right? So that was Bertolt Brecht, and the ones who joined Bertolt Brecht's tradition are John Osborne, right? The Angry Young Man movement. John Osborne, if you remember his play Look Back in Anger, social problem, right? his wife and himself, social conflict, right? It's a matter of socio-political conflict, class struggle. Right? And again, there is the novelist Kingsley Amis, right? Kingsley Amis, my dears, please go and read. Anybody can read Kingsley Amis, remarkable novelist. He's not, it won't be as difficult as generally the classics are. Kingsley Amis is very interesting to read, right? You must read Kingsley Amis, a very famous novel by Kingsley Amis, Lucky Jim, right? It's a campus novel. It's a campus novel. Remarkable, very interesting novel. Right? Kingsley Amis also belonged to the angry young men movement, right? And their answers, or let's say, suggestions, are founded upon, the materialist view, right? Money, power, place in society, so on and so forth. Right? They try to answer this question, by postulating, this philosophy of dialectical materialism. You see, I could go on and on to, tell you what dialectical materialism is and so on, but I suggest you find out on your own, right? Otherwise, we'll be losing precious time. Dialectical materialism, right, was what these people suggested, right? And then the second group, T.S. Eliot, right? T.S. Eliot and his, party suggested restoration of faith, right? Restoration of faith. And how do you do that? Through spiritual realization, right? If you listen carefully, you will know that I'm only summing up whatever I told you in the introduction, right? Restoration of faith through human, spiritual realization. And in that comes T.S. Eliot, William Golding, W.B. Yeats, even Rabindranath Tagore, right? Gitanjali, full of spiritual, self and spirituality and so on, right? And here, coming into our consideration, this radar is still, among T.S. Eliot, Golding, and W.B. Yeats, Tagore, we have William Golding, right? So Lord of the Flies is in a way a summation of the problem of the loss of human spirituality, right? The loss. Golding was mourning that, and that is why The Lord of the Flies is a very important novel. You may have heard of it, you may not have heard of it, right? Not many people, right? We are studying it in our syllabus, right? Everybody knows J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings, but nobody knows The Lord of the Flies, right? Why is that so, right? You read the novel and you'll find out, right? I don't think you even get the novel these days. Try to find the novel. Now, remarkable novel, children's novel, right? A group of children, in a post-war spacecraft, it crashes, and finally these boys are left alone to fend for themselves. And they try doing this, and they are quite successful at it, right? They join a party, Ralph, Piggy, Simon, Sam and Eric, Roger, and so on. They join together, they divide the work, you see. Beautifully, they form teams. There are some hunter-gatherers, right? Remarkable, I say so, due to the loss of words in describing that world to you, right? A primitive primordial society, what is called, I'll give you another useful term, a word. It's called atavistic, right? Atavistic. Go and look up this word in the dictionary, atavistic. Primitive, primordial, the fundamental general, fundamental nature of man and so on. This primal impulses had to be satisfied, right? You go get stuck in an island, forlorn island, right? You know that, right? Obviously, we've seen it in so many movies. But what do you do? Robinson Crusoe, for example, right? Something like that. But here are a group of boys, not adults, right? Teen, just beginning with their teens, 13, 14, 10, 11, and 7 and 8 and so on. So these boys have to regulate themselves. Now this is something like, what do you call, who is that? Thomas Paine, I think. Common Sense. Yeah, there is a text by Thomas Paine. I'm sorry. I'm not sure if it's Thomas Paine or E.M. Foster. Please find out, right? Common Sense, there is an essay, right? He talks about how, societies evolved and what is the idea behind it, right? Please compare this with William Golding's Lord of the Flies. You'll find it like an example, the novel, right? These boys go, they divide their work, and they divide roles to play, right? People who have to to have to hunt, and people who have to gather it, and people who have to cook, and people who have to look out for help in case anything passes by, any ship or flight passes by, and so on. So everybody is allotted proper roles and so on. Goes on well, goes on beautifully, but all of a sudden they encounter this mysterious beast, right? Mysterious beast. Problem is that is a man who has fallen from an aircraft and died, right? He is not a beast. The boys think it is a beast, and then flies are all over it, right? That is where the term the Lord of the Flies begins, and so on. And then Simon later becomes the Lord of the Flies, right? The Simon's dead body. Now, I don't want to go further into the implications of the title. Very interesting to go to, but not now, right? So let me again bring you to the essential thread, right? What is happening? What is Golding doing there? What is Golding doing in that novel? You see, he is showing you that the deterioration, right? The what you may call the ultimate deterioration of common sense, of social responsibility, of humanity, right? Everything is gone chaos. There you see chaos, right? The boys just want to eat, drink, and finally get home, right? Very simple procedure. But within that, without nobody to govern, without anybody to govern them, they go completely helter-skelter. The whole plan goes good for nothing, and it's become a bloody landscape, right? And people, and this guy, Sam, or who is he, Roger becomes bloodthirsty, right? And that is the precise portrayal he does of the spiritual deterioration, right? When you don't have little boys, they don't have a God to govern them. They don't have a religion to govern them. Where they don't have a philosophy to govern them. Maybe they've been hearing something from their parents. They have been hearing something from the church, but can't help them much. They are not adults, right? Now, the position they are in, right, unable to govern themselves and get themselves out of an issue. They are stuck in an issue. Everybody knows it. Stuck in a conflict. But try how they may, they are not going to get out of it. Why is that so? Because of those impulses that possess them, right? Greed. You got it? These will intersect, right? I would love to draw you a graph and show you these intersecting lines, right? The Marxist problem, the T.S. Eliottian problem, and also the realist problem, which I will come to later, right? Realist is Dostoevsky in 19th century, Balzac, and later contemporary realism is the final thing I'd like to talk to you about, right? Now, that much for Golding's view of the loss of the fundamental innocence, right? Children are supposed to be innocent. That's what the Bible has taught us. That's what every other religion is teaching us. Children are innocent people, right? But no longer, no. Why? Was it simply because of the post-war situation? No, that was not what William Golding was trying to do. If he had been doing that novel wouldn't have gone beyond the 1970s. It was published in 1954, right? Why has it lived another 70 years, right? That is universal. The problem there is universal. It is the questioning of the very fundamental principle of children being angels. Yes, they are, but they can turn dangerously devilish when the occasion calls for it, right? Now, obviously, we know this to be true, but read the novel, you'll get to know the intensity to which the devilishness in children or in primates, right? Human primates, right? We all have those devilish impulses. What would it do? How would it try to organize? When it fails, what would be the after effects? That is William Golding's Lord of the Flies right there for you. Spiritual, moral, intellectual, mental deterioration carried to the extremes, right? That was the, grasp, the hold that William Golding could make in the 1950s, right? Remarkable, very, very remarkable, right? Not to be underestimated, not like, it's a children's book, so, it's not as good as Waiting for Godot, or it's not as good as Lessing's Golden Book. No, no, not to be underestimated at all, right? Read the book once again. Now, finally, I'll come to the last answer in which our, Doris Lessing fits in, and which has been a little bit successful, right? A little bit successful, but still, again, the problem is in this digital age, we are not aware of subtle changes, very, very subtle changes in literature and so on. And that is why we are unable to see the level to which its implication is even today very evident in literature, right? The third one is the restoration of realism, right? Restoration of realism in literature. The third answer to this question, right? What is to be done? And these people, they tried to come to a conclusion that they would go and try restoring realist literature, right? But okay, sounds very simple, all right, but we know the realist trend, right? Realist trend did not just begin, in the 20th century. It began very long back, right? Different kinds of realism are there, right? Realism was there even in the 16th century, right? In Don Quixote, Cervantes' Don Quixote, and then, even in Richardson, in the 18th century, in Richardson, there was realism, right? And so on. But you know what I mean by realism. Realist fiction, generally, it belongs to the 19th century. Jane Austen, Dickens, right? Thackeray, and so on, Balzac, Flaubert. These are the classic realists, right? Marcel Proust also. Now, this realism was different. And I suggest you read a text by Raymond Williams. I already mentioned to you in one class. I want you to go back to it again. Raymond Williams, this thing, yeah. Realism and the contemporary novel. This text you will have in your MPhil, but because MPhil is now scraped off, you will have to read this text now. Raymond Williams, Realism and the Contemporary Novel, remarkably deals with the realism in English literature specifically, also in European literature. He takes it all the way from Goethe and then Schiller and so on and so forth. Beautifully illustrates. Now, this realism in the 20th century was a radically new kind of realism, right? A very new kind of realism, a new kind of realist approach to literature in which reality would be shown simply as it is, right? Simply as it is. Well, okay, fine. You can even try to apply this definition to postmodern literature, right? But I'll try to draw the line there for you, right? Even postmodernism would go somewhere around, taking reality and simply showing it exactly as it is from every possible angle, right? That is postmodernism right there for you. But now we are talking in the modernist realm, right? Up to the 1960s, we're not going beyond, right? After that comes postmodernism and plenty of other nonsensical, theoretical paradigms. But the modernist business here, this realist trend, exponentially, propounded or rather propagated by James Joyce, right? James Joyce is the pioneer here. James Joyce, and also Virginia Woolf to an extent, right? Virginia Woolf also to an extent, right? This realism you might have studied in your literary forms paper in UG, as the stream of consciousness novel, right? James Joyce and Virginia Woolf, stream of consciousness novel. This essential realism of presenting every single thing that goes on in the world and in the head of the characters is the kind of realism Virginia Woolf, was rather advocating in her 1910 or 1919 essay, right, Modern Fiction, as a text by Virginia Woolf. This kind of a realism she was suggesting. I'd like you to read that text too. She was suggesting, to follow the examples of Dostoevsky, the Russian writers, the realist trend there, how they brought about realism and so on. And so in order to do this, they had to experiment, right? They had to experiment. James Joyce, master experiment, right? Master experimenter, James Joyce, right? You can't match that, right? But then there are others. And one among them is Doris Lessing, right? This experimentation, right? Trying to do something, right? Trying to, answer this question, trying to restore. What did these people try to restore? They were trying to restore psychological order, right? Psychological order, right? Social order, psychological order. I'm borrowing these terms from Doris Lessing, right? But essentially what they're trying to do is, bring back humanity, right? Maybe summed up in these three words: bring back humanity, right? Let's look at the human side, right? Let's look at the human side, the proper human, solidarity, the truth of human beings, the bleak, bitter truths of human beings, the sweet and beautiful truths of human nature. Let's look at everything, right? Let's spread them like a, an immoderate feast. Let's just spread them, look at them, pick from them, right? Exaggerate one thing, belittle another, right? Play with these elements, and let's try to somehow present to the world a semblance of order and harmony, right? Some semblance of order and harmony. This is what Doris Lessing set out to do, and she has done it pretty well, pretty remarkably well. She has done it, right? You look at her novel again. Please buy this novel whenever it's possible, right? Quite a big book, but still, in today's standards, it's a big book, but actually, in my standards, it's a small book, right? The form. Even in Wikipedia, if you see, you will get to know what kind of a novel it is, right? 4 different notebooks, right? And then there is a 5th notebook, and her writing is all one notebook. All of a sudden, goes to another notebook. One moment she is personal, one moment she is philosophical, one moment she is political, one moment artistic, one moment sexual, one moment spiritual, so on and so forth. Harking back and forth in this literary style. She keeps going on, so much confusing at times. And like I told you, like I've already taught you about this novel in the previous lectures, it's all about this breaking up, cracking up, disorderliness, and trying to somehow fix this problem, right? Doris Lessing, amongst many others, right, is trying to fix this problem, trying to bring about some sweet harmony, right? Trying to bring about some sweet harmony. I know the cliche, it sounds cliche, but that's how it is. It has to be done. Humanity has to be seen for what it is. And they were trying it at different levels. James Joyce tried it at a different level, right? And let's say people like Iris Murdoch, right? Iris Murdoch, I would suggest, if you're fond of women writers, you can go and read Iris Murdoch, right? Remarkably, these people tried doing this business, right? And other giants, maybe, there is somebody, like, let's say, George Orwell, right? They were going to the extremes, right? George Orwell and Aldous Huxley, both these people, Huxley and dystopian fiction, right? They were trying to give a precise antithesis to the whole problem, thereby trying to, carry the postulation to an extreme, right? the dystopian fiction 1984 and Brave New World, you'll see they will be complete extreme exaggeration of human suffering, human impulses, and so on. But they did some serious business there, right? But and I don't want to comment upon it in this lecture, right? Coming to Doris Lessing again, right? Did she achieve this? I told you she sets out to do this, as Anna Wolf, the central character in her novel. She tries to reconcile with her writer's block and continue to write again, right? Continue to write again, going to the psychiatrist, getting some questions answered, writing in her diary, managing her friendship with Molly and her son Tommy, managing her political career, right? The traumatic experiences in Africa, not so traumatic as you would suggest, but a little bit traumatic and a little bit artistic, the experiences in Africa, her novel, her already published novel. She is trying to shape and organize her life through these notebooks, right? Red notebook, yellow notebook, blue notebook, and black notebook. Somehow, as the novel progresses, they begin to slowly become more singular, right? In the beginning of the novel, you will see, well, whatever should be in the red notebook would be in the black notebook. What should be in the black would be in the yellow. It would be confusing, right? But as it progresses towards the end, little bit it is getting reconciled, right? Little bit, the personal is going to the personal, artistic is going to the artistic diary, and the political is going to the political diary, and the creative is trying to move on towards the idea of that golden notebook, right? Trying to get a kind of a completion, a kind of a harmony. And then this golden notebook is, the incident that happens, how she got the golden notebook is not important. It is in the novel, right? She goes with her lover, right? Lover. She has two lovers, right? I don't remember their names properly. So the last guy, right? The last guy, Saul Green, I think, I don't remember correctly. And he is the one who, is desirous of this notebook, right? It's a beautiful notebook. And, finally, she has to, she wants to make him pursue his intellectual life, right? And that fellow wants Anna Wolf to pursue her writing life, to continue to become a writer, to start writing a story, right? And that is the story. In the beginning, it begins in this novel, right? Two women were alone in a London flat. That is the beginning of the novel, right? So in that golden notebook, that fellow, Anna Wolf's lover, he is the one who suggests that first sentence, right? Two women were alone in the London flat. And so she, by the end of Golden Notebook novel, she begins writing that sentence, this Free Women, right? The novel called Free Women, the novel inside the novel. And somehow Anna Wolf is slowly gaining her creativity back, right? Slowly she's gaining her creativity back. And slowly she's trying to leave that conclusion somewhere, by the end of these 600 odd pages. And what has been achieved here for Anna Wolf, on the one hand, she has expressed herself, right, as much as she could, right, as much as her mind would allow, her social position, her sex, how much it would allow, she expressed it, right, in the properly new realistic sense that I was talking to you about. James Joycean, right, realistic, modernistic realistic I'm talking about, right? And if you want a recent example, Salman Rushdie, right? Salman Rushdie, an unavoidable writer. You will have to meet with his work sometime or other, right? Salman Rushdie, he took it to magical realism, obviously, from Spain. These people. Who is that? Spain, or who was he? Gabriel Garcia Marquez and all that, right? Now this is the trend, right? Salman Rushdie and his fellow people who are doing that magic realism. it has gained currency, right? And what they were trying to do would be the subject of some other lecture. But Lessing, as she set out to do, trying to bring about a harmonious whole, did she achieve her purpose in this novel? Yes, right? Yes, to an extent, only to an extent. She made, if you like, the perfect novel, or within brackets, the perfectly fragmented novel, right? Fragmented psychology, fragmented consciousness. I hope you get the meaning of that word I am using. I've already used this several times in the class. Fragmentary, not whole, not unified, right? Broken up, right? That is today's world, right? Even today, now we are trying to pick up the pieces and join it together, right? Still broken up. So, this fragmentedness in Lacanian psychoanalysis and Derridian deconstruction is taken more seriously later on, but this was the kickstart to the proper realistic presentation of this fragmented person, fragmented society, fragmented politics, right? All broken up without proper connections where there shouldn't be connections, right? Sense and nonsense blending together, right? Gender, sexuality, and intellect, and impulsive, right, and philosophical and spiritual, or all these kinds of ideas, abstract things brought together, made into a story, right? That is all about literature. That is what it is trying to do, right? 20th century British literature, if you have to put it in one sentence, what it was trying to do, it was trying to organize a hitherto deteriorated and broken up society by attempting to bring a social order through the literary harmony, right? Through the use of literary elements, trying to bring up a beautiful story, trying to combine everything, make a beautifully, uniquely, different novel, like The Golden Notebook. It's a novel, not a novel, novel within a novel, story within a story, so on and so forth, right? So much complexities, but finally a remarkable, beautiful whole. In itself, it is what Cleanth Brooks would call a well-wrought urn, right? A beautiful piece of art. You can't remove anything from it, you can't add anything to it. Doris Lessing's Golden Notebook, a well-wrought urn, in the purpose she set out to do in the preface to this novel, right? With that, we'll conclude 20th century British literature. I have let some ideas hanging. Take it seriously and continue to read. Thank you very much, my dears. Thank you for bearing with me. We'll meet whenever it's possible next. Thank you. Bye-bye. Any questions, please contact me, right? Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.